Okay, so today we are looking at a little bit further into chapter 5 of your regular NASM textbook, although this lesson is not so much like a direct translation of chapter 5, so much as it is actually kind of like a lot of random pieces throughout your entire, like anything related to kinesiology. So we'll also be looking at some of the concepts that are related to the assessments chapter, actually, because that has such a closely knit relationship with chapter 5. Like chapter 5 is all about like biomechanics. Chapter 6 is all about like movement assessments and understanding like, how your client is squatting properly or improperly, So I'm excited because today is kind of cool. It's a lot of like concepts. So it's like a lot of, looking at these concepts that really do kind of separate us from someone who's just writing a general routine for someone. We are really going to look at like what to do about specifically overactive muscles and underactive muscles and things like that. And so we'll talk about like how muscles work, most efficiently and stuff. So looking at it, right, we want to describe how the human movement system sort of learns and produces movement. So that's another thing we're going to be looking at today is we'll talk about like how our nervous system actually develops human movement properly. So we want to be able to understand what the concept of like, we're a couple of our other pieces of terminology like force, right? We want to understand like what that is. Like there's force being generated by your muscles, but there's also forces acting upon your muscles in the form of like a resistance, like a resistive force, right? And then we'll also be looking at length tension relationship. So we got to look at the relationship between how long a muscle is and how much tension it can generate, because that's going to either result in increased or decreased force production. We will look at force couple relationships, which is where certain muscles are all working together to move things. We'll talk a little bit about muscle leverage and arthrokinematics. So we'll look a little bit more at like specific joint actions and movements and things like that. And then at the end, we'll go over our motor behavior, which is going to describe sort of how our nervous system sort of learns all this. So we're spending a lot of time talking about the force today. Kinesiology, right? If we're looking at it, right, we're talking about how our kinetic chain, how the human movement system sort of works, right? It's got to be able to interact with the surrounding environment. Like we have to be able to like move through this world that we all live in, and have like an ability to manipulate it here and there. So we need to be aware of its relationship to the environments as both internally and externally. So your body needs to have like kinesthetic awareness of like what's going on internally. So like if a muscle's being stretched or if it's being shortened or whatever. And also like it needs to be able to understand like how it's interacting with something that it's grabbing, right? Like how heavy something is, for instance. You guys might remember when I mentioned the way our nervous system works, right? Your nervous system will recruit as little motor units as possible to get the job done whenever it can. It'll always try to do the most amount of work with the least amount of resources, right? Which makes sense. I mean, that's kind of how, we always operate, right? And so like if you go to pick up like a heavy barbell, like a really heavy barbell, like it's your maximum intensity, it'll start by recruiting like 10 to 20 motor units, and it's like, okay, well clearly that didn't get the weight up, and then it tries like 20 to 30 motor units, and that didn't work until eventually it's a couple thousand motor units, and then boom, you're getting this big heavy barbell up off the ground. And the thing about that is like, it sounds like it'd be like we tried 10 to 20, that didn't work. We tried 20 to 30, that didn't work. We tried 30 to 40, that didn't work, right? Like, it sounds like it's a slow process, but it's actually very, very fast. I mean, your nervous system is, and no pun intended here, but lightning fast. Like it's travels at the speed of freaking electric impulses. So talking about like how your nervous system is gathering information regarding the environment, right? Like it needs to determine how many resources it's going to need to use in order to create this human movement, right? And that's great because like we start with the small, that way I can lift something, like this coffee mug without flinging it into the ceiling. You always see that in like that's like a trope in like superhero movies or like cartoons where someone gets like a superpower and they like wake up and then they break everything. That is actually a very accurate depiction of like what would happen. Like, because their nervous system would be like, oh, I assume I'll need 50% of the motor units available in order to lift that, because I've lifted something like that before. But then now they're like way stronger. They have way more motor units. So now suddenly they recruit 50% of them and they rip the door off the hinges or something. And they're like, huh, that's weird. That is a very, very accurate depiction of what would happen if you were to get superpowers very suddenly. All of that is gonna help you produce the appropriate responses, and that's gonna help ensure like the proper movement of our sort of human movement system here, right? So here's the thing about like muscles, right? And we gotta look and talking about like how your entire body is kind of working together, right? I love this sentence right here. So it's the traditional perception of muscles is that they work concentrically and predominantly in one plane of motion. Like a lot of like when we think about like how muscles work, a lot of times, I want to say like amateurs, but I guess like non-experts, when they consider it's like, okay, like, yeah, like a muscle pulls and that, overcomes like some type of resistance, right? But when you look at like a force couple, right? And when I say force couple, I'm talking about multiple muscles that work to surround a joint and all produce like a movement together, right? Not like a force couple like Kim and Kanye. That's my favorite dumb joke. When we look at like a force couple, right? Your rotator cuff's a really good example of this because there's a lot of muscles that are attached on the front of your humerus and on the back of your humerus. So if we look at like humerus, actually, let's go shoulder joint muscles. If we look at all the muscles within your shoulder joint, you can see they're all wrapping around. Like there's some in the front that are wrapping around here. And then if we were to look at the posterior side, you can see there's some wrapping around the back here, right? So we got around the back, we've got around the front. We've got some different attachment sites here. They're all doing sort of different things, right? And what that does is, now you can pull on this side and that can rotate it this way, or you can pull on this side and that'll rotate it that way, right? And so you can create this like rotary movement. Meanwhile, you've got some that are going over top and that can go up this way, right? We got a lot of different ways that we can like move our shoulders. And so we need this group of muscles to all work together. We need all of them to produce movement at the same time. So when I want to internally rotate my shoulder, what I need to have happen are my internal rotators need to contract concentrically. So, they do the thing that, again, like traditionally how we think muscles work, it's, concentrically, right? So we think of that way. We do see like that concentric acceleration happening. But at the same time, my opposite muscle on the other side of my joint, it needs to eccentrically lengthen. It needs to let go and uncontract a muscle. I mean, it's still contracting, but it needs to contract while it's lengthening. Contract for less force than that muscle that's shortening, right? And that's going to create that rotary movement. Just like when my bicep contracts this way, my tricep needs to relax. And by doing that, by doing one muscle pulling and one muscle relaxing in the way that they're supposed to, that's going to create efficient human movement, right? But again, most people, they don't train that way. What we often see in like a lot of people who start working out, without hiring a trainer and just kind of finding an exercise online, you see a lot of people putting a lot of effort into concentric force production. They work a lot on the heavy lifting portion of it, but they don't do much they don't control their eccentric lifting, or they don't do any isometric stabilization or anything like that. And they're missing out on two ways that your muscles work entirely. And are arguably more important than concentric force production. I mean, eccentric lengthening, if I don't want my muscles to be bad at lengthening. I don't want my muscles to be weak when I stretch them out, because they might pull, they might tear. We might not get exactly what we want to get out of that. So it's really important to make sure that like we are working all of our muscles in all three in all three muscle contractions. And we want to make sure that we're working them through multiple planes of motion, because a lot of times this is another problem that we see. Most of our clients pick very sagittal plane movements. Let's take a look here. Let's take a look at this. I'm just going to pick up a 3-day workout routine. We're going to look at the first 3-day workout routine we got. Click this very first image here, and we'll take a look. So off the bat, we've got the bench press, which isn't bad. There's a little bit of, there's an ever so slight amount of transverse motion there, like horizontal adduction, like bringing the humerus this way. That's a little transverse. So they've got a little bit of transverse plane action in there. But we can look at the elbow. That's going to be sagittal plane, right? The elbow is performing elbow extension. So that would be sagittal. Incline dumbbell chest press, same concept, right? That's definitely going to be a little bit of elbow extension as well as like horizontal adduction. Cable crossover, that's a transverse plane movement. Then we see the overhead press. That's again elbow extension paired with shoulder abduction. So we get a little bit of abduction there. We got our first bit in the frontal plane. We got lateral raises, which is frontal plane, skull crushers, which is very much only sagittal, and tricep press down, which is very much only sagittal. Now, I don't have anything against this workout. This is actually pretty good. Like if I'm analyzing this, I'm like, this is a good chest day. If they're getting 3 sets here, 6. This is 9 sets for their chest. This is another 6 sets for their shoulders, and another 3 sets for their 6 sets for their triceps. If you did this once a week, this actually might get you pretty good results in terms of like muscle growth and hypertrophy and things like that. But in terms of like, is it developing, are you developing your nervous system to correctly control your body? Well, you're kind of getting good at only a very specific type of movements, right? So let's keep moving forward. Let's take a look at the upper back day, right? We see a cable row, which is going to be a motion like this, right? So that's going to be shoulder extension as well as elbow flexion, right? So this motion right here. So shoulder extension, which we see here, and elbow flexion, which we see here. So as we're doing that row, so that's sagittal plane, right? We see a lat pull. There's a little frontal plane action, right? There's shoulder adduction here, right? And then more elbow flexion, so sagittal plane again. Reverse flies, there we go, transverse plane, right? Now we're going, back this way. That's good. Hyper extensions, that's a sagittal plane movement. That's definitely more of a hamstring movement than it is an upper back, but I get it. They always do that. We see hyper extensions there. And then we're going to see barbell curls. That's very much sagittal plane. And then hammer curls, that's very much sagittal plane because it's just elbow flexion. So again, a lot of sagittal plane, 1 frontal plane, 1 transverse plane movement. And then we look at the legs and core. Right. And this is probably like the 2 most important areas. We see a lot of lower leg injuries, and that's your foundation for everything. And we see a lot of core injuries, right? So that's also not ideal. So let's take a look at what we see here. The squat, very much sagittal. Love that movement. Love the squat, right? But it's only sagittal plane. The leg press, basically exactly the same as the squat. So we're definitely seeing sagittal plane again. Leg extensions, which is sagittal, leg curls, which is sagittal, standing calf press raises, which is sagittal. The plank, I guess, is not really moving through any plane of motion, but it's very much focused on just one section of the abdominals. And then crunches, which is spinal flexion. So again, sagittal, right? So we see an entire day dedicated only to the sagittal plane. We saw a couple transverse movements in the upper body, and we see 1 transverse moves in the upper body here, and then a little bit of frontal plane, but again, like mostly sagittal. So this is what we see in a lot of workouts. And by the way, I don't hate this routine. This is actually not bad. I don't know about like these hyperextensions here. I'd probably swap that out. And I hate the leg press, so I'd probably kill that as well. I'd swap that out for a deadlift in a heartbeat. And then, leg extension, I'd probably swap for like a lunging movement so I can get a little more glute in there. But I love the leg curl. Leg curl is actually one of my favorite movements, just because a lot of people have weak hamstrings. And then I don't do calf raises personally. And I rarely do them with my clients. Not that calf raises aren't good. I just think most people have overdeveloped calves. If I shouldn't say that. I've definitely made people do calf presses before. But it's always like my bodybuilders, trying to like carve it out. Flanks crunches, love those. They're fine. So, not a bad routine. I really don't dislike it. But my issues with it is if this is the only type of lifting that you do, if this is the only way that you'd like train your body, you're getting pretty good at like heavy lifting. You saw a lot of those reps were 6 to 8 for the big compound movements, and like 8 to 12 for the more isolation movements. And that's also fine. Actually, I don't dislike that either. But the heavier you lift, the more effort most people place on concentric lifting. It's very difficult when you are lifting really heavy to control that weight on the way back. You don't want to control it as much. You want to just do, sort of a big explosive movement to kind of overcome that resistance. So a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on concentric contractions, like the squeezing part. But like I said, we know that that's not the only thing that's important. And we also see, like I said, like a lot of sagittal plane movements. So could you do that exact workout and get really good results? Yeah. Could you do it and but could you do it and also be like very athletic and healthy and, have like sustainable, long-term proper human movement? Well, you would need to make some adjustments. I think that workout could work really well, but I would definitely incorporate more of a movement preparation section beforehand, where I do sort of a mobility routine or like an activation routine, mobility and activation together, before going into that, and so that would involve like balance exercises, reactive exercises, specific core exercises, and I would do that at the top of the workout instead of at the bottom of it, because I want to emphasize that stuff. That's the stuff that keeps you from getting hurt. I've been working in this industry a long time, and it's very funny. I've very rarely, don't get me wrong, like I've had things go wrong in like a training session, like a client maybe just, gets a little twinge out of nowhere, like something kind of, a little achy, and they're like, that's weird, that actually that felt bad. And it's like, really, that rep looked good to me. And it's like, I don't know, it felt a little funny. And then like the next day they wake up and they're like, yeah, my back's really sore. It's like, oh snap, we went a little heavy, like I've definitely had stuff like that happen. I've never had like a major injury. I've never had like a client like sprain an ankle. I broke my hand once, but that was unrelated. But I've never had like a client actually get injured in the gym. And it is extremely rare that I have had a client injure themselves doing their homework in the gym. So that's another thing that's like very rarely has happened in my career. You're not going to see it very often, guys. Like your clients are going to be, they're really not going to hurt themselves that often in the gym, which is kind of funny because you think of the gym as sort of it's assumed that it's sort of an inherently dangerous place, which I mean, it is. There's a lot of heavy, hard stuff around there, and lots of unstable, wobbly, people moving around, people not putting their weights back and stuff, so you're likely to trip over, like that stuff exists in the gym. But what's kind of funny about that is because it is sort of a high risk environment, people are more cautious. They pay more attention. They take care of themselves. So it's pretty rare that your clients will hurt themselves in the gym. But where it is not so rare is where your client will hurt themselves at home in the garden, or picking something up off the floor while they're home, or at work twisting around to kind of grab something. People often experience their injuries in places that have nothing to do with the gym, because it's when it comes unexpectedly. They step off a curb without, you know, realizing that it was there or something, right? There's one more step on a staircase that you know just didn't notice for some reason, right? So what ends up happening is you have this sort of emergency recruitment. And if you spend all your time developing only in the sagittal plane, what's going to happen if you step off a curb like, you know, if I step off a curb like this in the frontal plane and I don't know how to stabilize, right? Am I going to be okay? Probably not. I'm probably going to twist something, you know, torque my knee, right? What happens if I try to twist around and grab something, you know, but I'm not used to doing twisting motions? I've developed all these muscles that are really good at crunching my abs forward, but I never taught my abs how to twist, right? like what's going to happen? We're going to see injuries. So this is another one of the reasons why we need to, we spend so much, we put such a big emphasis on this. And you guys can tell, I've been emphasizing this for probably 20 minutes now. These are really the essentials that kind of set the routines that we build for our clients apart from, you know, that traditional stuff they're going to find in a magazine. And I want to be fair. I totally want to be fair here. That magazine stuff, it can be fine. It can totally get results in terms of like aesthetically. It can, you know, grow your muscles and stuff, which looks really good, which is, you know, there's value in that. But there's a difference between, you know, aesthetics and athletics, you know. We want to make sure that our clients are athletic. I always say this, like, if you have a body, you're an athlete, you know, like, so it's imperative to view our muscles in all of their planes of motion through the entire muscle action spectrum. That's going to be a hugely, hugely important thing. Do we have any questions or comments so far before I kind of dive into sort of the more traditional, get into the definitions here? Nope. All right. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at force, right? So force, by definition, it's an influence applied by one object to another object that either results in acceleration or deceleration of the second object. So it's, I mean, that's an okay definition. Like if you think about it, like, you know, one muscle is, or one entity is generating a certain amount of force, and then that's either going to overcome another amount of force or maybe, you know, be overcome by. It's going to result in some type of movement, right? I like this one, the interaction between two entities that either results in acceleration or deceleration. So, you know, if I am producing force, right, I would be overcoming something. And if I were reducing force, I'd be letting that something sort of overcome me, right? So force is, you know, what we're talking about. We say like, you know, high force, high velocity, right? Like force is the amount of you know, newtons like applied to something, right? You know, if we look at like how much tension you're generating in your muscles, that's your force. And then we know like velocity is like how quickly something happens. So, you know, a lot of times we want to be able to produce lots of force in minimal time in order to be considered like strong, right? Or we want to be able to reduce force effectively at the right times, right? I need to be able to land and reduce my force, you know, and that's going to involve like, you know, knowing how to develop that tension. Developing tension in your muscles is how we apply force. So your human movement system is designed to manipulate forces in a lot of different ways. And so we need to have a pretty good understanding of how the different parts of the kinetic chain are sort of working to produce this force. So one of the most important things, and I'd say this is, honestly, I glancing forward, if I'm looking at things, I would say, honestly, the most important definition of the day. And you know, it's like picking your favorite child, which you should never do. So I'm, you know, these are all very good definitions, but probably what I feel like is the most vital to understanding like how to be a good trainer is understanding length tension relationships. I know you guys have heard me talk about this before if you've been through any of our other classes. But a length tension relationship is it's the relationship between how long your muscle is and how much tension that muscle can generate at that length. If a muscle's over lengthened, it can't generate very much tension. If a muscle's over shortened, it can't generate very much tension. So we want to have a good length of our muscles so that it can generate as much tension as possible. That is more commonly referred to. That's honestly what we think of when we think of posture. Posture is the ideal resting position where you've got ideal length tension relationships. So the relationship between the length and the tension is in a good place, right? It's in like an area where, both those things are kind of maxed out. If you've ever, it's like min-maxing, if you've ever heard of that. Minimizing any, downfalls and maximizing any oh my God, maximizing any benefits. It's the resting length of a muscle and the tension that it can produce at that resting length. There's another definition here as well. The other definition you'll sometimes hear is it's the greatest degree of overlap of actin and myosin filaments. So what we're seeing here, right? We've got 3 versions of a sarcomere, right? We can see this version here is a sarcomere that's very shortened, right? Like, look at how much space there is to kind of move here. There's not very much space, right? There's honestly, like, all the actin and all the myosin, they've already kind of crawled across each other. This muscle's pretty much maxed out. So you'll look at how much force you can generate. It's pretty low, right? It can't generate very much force because there's nowhere else for it to contract, right? We know that muscle contractions happen because actin and myosin form those cross bridges and they crawl across each other, creating that sliding action. Well, if the sliding's already occurred, I can push all I want. I'm not going anywhere, They're already crossed over. Whereas if we look over here, and we'll ignore the middle one for now, take a look over here, you can see this is a muscle that's way too lengthened. And so what's happening here is like they've got just like a little bit of grip. They're just barely holding on, right? Like and so like now when you're trying to like produce that force, they just don't have a very good grip in order to like exert that force. So this is an underactive muscle over here, right? There's a lot of space to move, which is kind of a good thing. But unfortunately, it doesn't apply very well because there just isn't a very much overlap. I mean, look at how many of these fibers over here are just not getting used, right? Versus what we see right here, which is an ideal length tension relationship. This is exactly what we're looking for. So now we can see there's plenty of room to move, but there's also a lot of cross bridging that is already happening. So that makes it very easy. You've got a really good connection between these two things, So that's the greatest degree of overlap between the actin and myosin fibers. There's not too much overlap and there's not too little overlap, right? And that's length tension relationship. And what's really important to know about this is that lengthening a muscle beyond its optimal resting length will result in a force reduction. You are going to have yeah, question. What's up, Kenny? Oh. Force reduction, you'll lose force, right? You are going to lose your ability to produce force. So we do not want to over lengthen our muscles, right? That's going to be, we call that an underactive muscle. It's a muscle that can't contract even though it's supposed to. And then we see a shortening too, like shortening a muscle beyond its optimal length means there's too much overlap. And that's also going to result in a reduction in your muscle's ability to produce force. So again, we can kind of see here's a lengthened muscle, here's a shortened muscle, where all this is already kind of crossed over one another. Here it doesn't have any grip. And then over here, this is an ideal resting length. This is a normal resting length. This is what you would see in a neutral posture. So imagine somebody with like rounded shoulders, right? We call that upper crossed syndrome, by the way. And actually, I'll look that up for you. Upper crossed syndrome. So when we look at upper cross syndrome, it's where you'll see we've got muscles that are overactive on one side and muscles that are underactive on the other. So they're going to have a tight upper trapezius muscle, which is this muscle that elevates your shoulders like this. Okay, and then we've got a tight levator scapula, which is a little muscle that runs up to the back of the neck right here. It's really close to the upper traps actually, and it's also in charge of doing this, but it also does a little bit of that. It tilts your scapula forward a little bit as well. And then we see tight muscles in the pectoralis, right? The muscles that are pulling your shoulders forward. They cause shoulder protraction and they cause horizontal adduction, right? That's your pectorals. There's two pectorals, right? The pec major is the one that does the flying motion, right? The chest pressing motion. But your pec minor, which is a little short one that lays underneath it, that one rounds your shoulders forward. So that one's creating that motion. So now we see tightness here in the upper back, and we see in the neck area, and we see tightness here in the chest area. And what that does is that causes like that tightness that's pulling those muscles and it's rounding them forward. And we see this kind of posture like this, right? And that is upper cross syndrome. Those are the tight muscles. These muscles are right here, right? They're already overlapped. So now what's happening is that's keeping their antagonist muscles, the muscles that work exactly opposite them, they can't contract. They're all being pulled into like massive amounts and they don't have a good grip anymore and they cannot contract. So these tight muscles are causing these underactive muscles, or maybe these underactive muscles are causing this overactive muscles, kind of it's a two-way street. So now if we go like opposite muscles of, these tight muscles back here, if we go to the other side, we're going to see weak neck cervical flexors, right? We see some weakness here in the neck that actually is supposed to keep your head nice and upright and like, back on your body and like standing tall. And then we see weak muscles here in the lower trapezius, which is exactly the opposite of the upper trapezius. And we see a weakness in the serratus anterior, which are these little muscles underneath the arms, those little like, you see the little fillets sometimes when people have like a really low body fat percentage. That's the serratus, right? And so those muscles are in charge of like, tilting your scapula back to neutral, as well as like pinching your shoulder blades back. And so, this is how we should be standing. But again, we see most of our clients and they kind of look like this, right? We see that rounding. So some muscles are overly tightened and some muscles are overly weakened. And we call this upper crossed syndrome, by the way, because it's happening in the upper body and it makes an X. You go from tight in the back up high to tight in the front down below. And then the exact opposite is true for the weak muscles. You have weak in the front up above and weak in the back down below. So it creates a cross. You'll also see like lower crossed syndrome, which looks like this. That's where you get somebody who has like the Instagram booty. They've got like that major overly intense low back arch. There we go, actually, there it is. You can kind of see like way too much, right? Versus like a normal, just the low back curve, but this is like an intense low back curve, right? That's lower cross syndrome. And what that often results in is what we see here, where the sort of abdomen kind of, pooches out and then creates too much concavity here. And then we see the upper cross syndrome happening as well. These are often, they kind of come together. So, and again, that's lower cross syndrome because it forms like tightness up above and tightness down below, and then like weakness up above and weakness down below. So it makes an X. So those are our length tension relationship. That's, like I said, this is probably the reason this is probably the most important thing for us to kind of latch on to today, is because this is the entire concept behind knowing what exercises to give your client when it comes to their flexibility and what exercises to give your client when it comes to their strength, right? If I had a client, let's say we go with lower crossed syndrome, right? If I had a client, and I want to see the X here, who has this sort of excessive, low back rotation, and I know they have like tight low back muscles and tight hip flexor muscles, this is what I'm going to spend my time stretching before our workout starts. So I'm probably going to have them do like a 90-90 spinal twist, right, where they're bringing one leg over and they're doing that twist. Probably have them doing like a child's pose where they're stretching out their erector spinae. And then that's a really great one to also kind of get under the lat. So child's pose is great. And then we see tightness in the hip flexors and the iliopsoas and the rectus femoris. So those are the muscles on the front of the hip. So I'm probably also going to have this person doing like a kneeling hip flexor stretch, which is going to kind of allow this to kind of loosen up. And then once those muscles are loosened up, right? Once this is, you know, no longer pulling too much in the back and this is no longer pulling too much in the front, right? And I'm no longer creating that intense tilt. What I can do then is I can strengthen, I can pull those muscles back, you know, to the position I want them in, right? So now I can strengthen the abdominals in the front, which now there's a good relationship between the stuff in the back and the stuff in the front, right? I'm not pulling too much here and, you know, allowing that pull to happen here. I'm getting them back to neutral, right? Obviously, I don't want to go too far and go the other way either, but you know, if they're here, I want to get them back to here. Same thing is true here. If I've got those hip flexors that were pulling too much in the front, but I strengthen my glutes, that's going to pull me back to a neutral position. So what are they going to get? I'm going to give them a 90-90 spinal twist. I'll give them a child's pose, a kneeling hip flexor stretch, and a standing TFL stretch. Those will probably be my 4 stretches for this client, right? And then before their workout starts, I'm going to do some prone iso abs, so do some planks, probably do some side iso abs because I love that one too. So probably do some side planks, working on the abdominals there. Probably doing like a bird, maybe not a bird dog. Yeah, probably like a McGill setup or something, like just a little like, you know, sit up and then hold and like contract those abs, strengthen the abdominals in the front. And then in the back, I'm probably gonna do a lot of like floor bridges, you know, things where they're really focusing on just that hip extension, right? And those floor, yeah, that's gonna be a great glute activation. Or maybe, you know, just like a single leg balance with reach where they're, you know, practicing doing like their medial glute and then doing their posterior glute, right? So they do a little bit of hip abduction and hip extension, right? And then that's gonna turn the moneymaker on. So that's what we're gonna see. That's my mobility routine. It takes 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes before at the top of my client's session. And then we get the rest of the day to do, you know, the what was that routine? Squats into a leg press, into a leg extension, into a hamstring curl, into a calf press. They could do the crunches if they could do the more planks, and then they could do more subs if they wanted to, you know? And here's the thing. Once they go through that routine, which is the routine they would have done anyways, right? That's the one we looked up earlier. All the muscles are going to fire the way they're supposed to. They're going to have naturally much better form than they would have if they didn't, you know, loosen something up or you know, turn something else on, you know? So we're waking up the groggy muscles and we're shutting down the overeager muscles. Any questions or comments on length tension relationships, guys? Everybody pretty clear on that?
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a look at force velocity curve. So this is our next concept. Also really important, but this one's a little bit more based. This definitely kind of becomes more of a an athlete conversation kind of naturally, because it is all about like producing velocity, right? So we're talking about like speed here. So your force velocity curve is honestly, like, you can think of it as a force velocity relationship. It's a relationship between force and velocity. So it refers to your muscle's ability to produce force with increasing velocity. So remember, we talked about like once a muscle is already shortened, it can't really produce very much force. But by that point, it's produced so much force that it can start producing increased velocity. So it can start getting it even faster, even though it's producing less force. So when you think about like a concentric contraction, guys, here's how you want to think about this. If something is high force, meaning it's heavy, right? It's going to have low velocity, which makes perfect sense when you think about it, right? Like when you're like picturing the last time you were maybe doing something really heavy and you were like, oh my God, that's so, and you're trying to move it as fast, you know, maybe trying to move it and get this lift over with, but you're not exactly moving very quick. That's a high force, low velocity situation, right? And then the exact opposite is true of high velocity movements. Generally, high velocity movements, you know, they move really quick, but they don't have to be very, very, very heavy. You know, we think about like clap push-ups, right? Clap push-ups, it's just your body weight, it's just a push-up. So there's not a ton of resistance there. So it allows you to move with lots of velocity, even if there isn't a lot of force being produced. So that's what we see in terms of this force velocity curve. And you kind of see what we're talking about here. So as the velocity increases, its ability to produce force is going to decrease. So as we're sort of picking up speed through the middle of a movement, your ability to continue producing more force, which would further accelerate you, sort of decreases, right? Think about it as like in the beginning, like let's say you're doing like a sprint. You're on like the sprinter's block, you're doing a 100-meter dash, right? You know, at first, like that first initial kick, there's a ton of force production there. So you go from 0 to, you know, close to your top speed pretty quick. And then like, there's just a little bit more like force. I mean, let's actually look at a 100-meter dash here. And we'll put it in slow-mo. Yeah, let's see. We gotta watch Usain Bolt. He's the king. All right, here we go. So we'll watch this just a little bit in normal speed here. And it's kind of what you can see, right? They all kind of start leaning forward a little bit and then eventually get into sort of a more upright position. Man, he wins by a mile. He's so fast. It's insane. Oh, man. Every time I watch it. All right. Let's see here. We're going to slow this down. All right. Now watch how much, you know, digging they're doing in the beginning, right? Pick any person on here. Just watch them. You can see so much digging, right? And so much like force production. There's almost like a little bit of extra lateral movement, right? And then you start to see their strides actually shorten up a little bit. And now they get into sort of more of an upright position where their body is very, very upright because now they've already produced lots of force. So their ability to produce more force is already limited. They're not going to be able to continue producing force through the entire 100 meters, right? Incredible. So there, you know, or we see it in like the 40-yard dash. You'll see it in NFL athletes. This is actually always really noticeable as well, because you'll see, especially with like, you know, cleats on like an AstroTurf or like on a grass field, you'll see some really intense. Look at how much digging there is, right, side to side. Lots, like all this digging. And then again, they get more into an upright position. And once they're more in an upright position, you know, they're not so much focusing on force anymore. They're focusing on velocity. So they're focusing on like, you know, keeping up that velocity. So these have an inverse relationship. High force, you're going to have low velocity. High velocity, you're going to have low force. You know, I can't throw a bowling ball as fast as I can throw a baseball, you know? And the reason for this, as we can see, is, you know, there's just, you know, the overlapping of your actin and myosin filaments, they're already overlapped. So they're not going to be able to produce very much more force. Now, the exact opposite is true in, you know, a different type of contraction. In an eccentric contraction, as the velocity of eccentric muscles increases, its ability to produce force also increases. So this is what's kind of cool, right? Because we look here, you know, if this is concentric force production, let's say this is where the muscle's resting and it's contracting to here, right? This has a lot of potential to produce force. This has very little potential to produce force, right? But what's cool is now that this muscle is contracted like this, concentrically, the antagonist muscle on the other side it looks like this now, right? So we could even, let's see here, actually, let me see, hopefully I can do this quickly and efficiently. Let's copy this and take this over to Paint. So here's and I'm gonna steal this whole drawing. Okay, so this would be a normal resting length muscle here, right? This is a muscle at rest. So this is resting muscle. So, and we'll say it's and all these are ideal examples. So we'll say it's an ideal resting muscle, right? That's what we're seeing in this version. So that would look kind of like this. That would look, you know, we would take, actually, you know what, we'll do the sarcomere version. We'll take this, and we're basically going to put it like right here. Let's see here, come on. Can I rotate it? There's got to be a way to rotate it. Alt, Control, rotate. What? Not 90 degrees. Oh, it won't let me do it. That's so annoying. All right, well, I can't do what I want to do then. I want to turn this freaking thing sideways. Wait, actually, hold on. Resize. Rotate. I don't want to do 90. Let me do 45. Will that do? No. Okay. All right. This was a huge failure. Someday I will have a real whiteboard again. All right. So when we take a look at this here, right, like the relationship between this concentric contraction is that the muscle is in a shortened position, right? Whereas the opposite muscle, the antagonist muscle, has been eccentrically lengthened into a long position. So this muscle's ability to produce force concentrically is reduced. This muscle's ability to produce force concentrically is increased because it's got plenty of room to move, right? So when we see that in a force couple, or when we see that in a stretch shortening cycle, we want to see, like, we want a big, long eccentric contraction that gets really lengthened out, gives us maximum potential to shorten that muscle and produce as much force as possible. So that concept right here, right, which we call, like I said, it's called a stretch shortening cycle. This is going to describe how we take advantage of our force velocity curves. Okay. So again, force velocity curve is if a muscle's already concentrically contracted, it's going to have a low ability to produce force, even though it will have high velocity by that point. Whereas, like, you know, the exact opposite would be true on the other side of the joint. So this is why stretch shortening cycles work the way they do, right? So what a stretch shortening cycle is it describes how a rapid eccentric contraction, so that's lengthening, right, is going to result in a more powerful concentric contraction. So basically, by stretching a muscle out, now you've got a lot of ability to produce force, so you can unload it and release a ton of force, right? So our muscles are kind of like rubber bands, and the more you stretch them out, right, you start stretching that rubber band, and then, like, you go to here, and then it's like you're stretching it like crazy, right? And then all of a sudden you let it go and it flies, right? So our muscles have that kind of elastic property. When you rapidly lengthen a muscle, it will naturally want to contract in the exact opposite direction, because your muscles don't want to be over lengthened. They'll go, no, and then they want to pull back. So if we want to jump explosively, if we want to jump higher, if we want to be more explosive, we have to take advantage of stretch shortening cycles. So you never want to jump like this. When you go down kind of slow and sort of hold that, and then maybe just like sit here and then jump. You're going to not have, your ability to produce force is going to be way reduced because you're lengthening out your muscles. Yes, that's a good thing. That lengthening results in your ability. You got plenty of room to move now. You can produce a lot of force, right? But the problem is you let it sit there. And now your nervous system's going, oh, okay, well, you know, we were a little freaked out when you stretched us out that much, but turns out we're fine. We can sort of sit this resting length, and then your muscle kind of calms down. It loses
that elastic property, right? It's like a rubber band that you stretched out and you left it stretched out for a year, like now it's all cracked and worn out and, probably going to break, and it lost its elastic properties, that happens when you don't move explosively. You lose the elastic explosive properties of our muscles. So if I do want to jump high, don't get me wrong, I need to get into this position. I need to get nice and low so that I can produce lots of force and go nice and high, right? But I don't want to go down slow. I want to go down fast, right? So I want to go boom and then up, right? I want to spring down and spring back up. The faster I go down, the faster I will come back up because of the stretch shortening cycle. I stretch a muscle out, and that allows me to shorten it and explosively move, right? Boom. And so this is actually part of like why jumping technique is taught the way we teach it, where we say, I want you to throw your arms down, right? Throwing your arms down, that gives you a little bit of this, you're using your arms to give you a little more like rapid stretching. And then I want you to throw your arms back up as hard as you can, right? And, you do that as you're jumping. And that throwing of the arms motion, you get a little bit of extra like momentum, you get a little extra lift. It's like the way Chris Hemsworth flies in the Marvel universe, right? Throws the hammer and he catches it and carries him off the ground. You're doing the same thing with your arms when you throw your arms up in the air. And this is why you'll see, if you look at like the NFL high jump, it's always the example I show. NFL high. You'll see like they're taught to do this, particularly they go through like training for the NFL Combine. So you'll notice they throw their arms down, and then that allows them to be super explosive as they like come all the way up, right? So they rapidly stretch, and that allows them to rapidly shorten, right? So we'll slow it down on this next. Let's slow it down again. So rapid eccentric lengthening, rapid concentric shortening, and you get a big freaking jump. So this is another mistake that a lot of people make when they're training for explosiveness. You'll see people trying to train like people to be explosive, and they'll focus on the concentric throwing part, but then they don't focus on the eccentric lengthening. And it's like, that's a huge part of being explosive. You need to go fast in both directions if you want to jump for maximum velocity. So now we know a little bit more about like producing force the way we're supposed to, and we know about producing velocity the way that we're supposed to. And that's going to come together to create like true athleticism, right? Because a lot of times when you think about like what a sport is, it's just whoever can do a particular movement faster. Like think about like offense and defense on like, football or basketball or whatever, right? If both people, like if one person's got a basketball and they're just trying to like get to the hoop, which is over there, whoever can do that the fastest is going to win. Like you're going to drive straight through the other person or maybe around them because they're able to produce more force, or they're going to transfer directions. If I can transfer direction from here to here and back to here faster than you can, then I'm the more agile one, and therefore I'm going to be the one that gets there before you, and that's going to mean winning my athletic event. That's why velocity is so important here. So this is where we got to look at like the next thing we got to look at is our force couples. But any questions on that last part? Force velocity curve, stretch shortening cycles, anything like that? Okay. So let's look at force couples here. So a force couple is defined as the synergistic action of muscles to produce movements around a particular joint. So every joint in your body is surrounded by muscles, and they all pull at different sections. They all do different things. That's that group of muscles would be called a force couple. It's several. It's the couple of muscles that are working.
I like this definition here. I put this up. It's how our muscles work together to produce movement around a joint. The agonist concentrically contracts along with the synergist, which is also concentrically contracting. So the agonist and the synergist are working together. The antagonist muscle, it's pulling in the opposite direction, but it's, hopefully there's a good force couple relationship. So it's not pulling too much. It's just pulling enough to create some stability. And then your stabilizer muscles are kind of holding the rest of the joints that really aren't associated with the muscle that you're working directly, but they're stabilizing everything around, so you have a good base of support. Basically stuff's holding your spine in place while you do something else. This is why sometimes, like, if you're doing like lateral raises, you'll feel a little bit in your abs, right? Because this is not doing any movement, but it is stabilizing as I'm like changing. You'll especially feel it if you do like single side lateral raises, because then it'll want to go this way and you are resisting that force and staying upright. So a force couple, right? Your muscles are working together around a joint. So take a look here. This is the best example. You look at like your entire like shoulder joint. You've got your upper trapezius, which pulls a little bit this way, your middle trapezius, which pulls a little bit this way, lower traps, which pull this way, and then your serratus and pec muscles and deltoid muscles, like all these muscles that are pulling out this way. So that's creating stability, right, around that joint. Your rotator cuff's a really good example. The classic example of a force couple is to think of a steering wheel, right? Imagine I was holding onto a steering wheel like this. If I pull down with this hand and I pull up with this hand simultaneously, that creates that rotary movement, but I never lose control of the wheel. And I can go back this way, right? Versus something like this, which I would have ever so slightly less control because I'm not creating stability from the other side, So that's what we look at when we look at force couples. We want to have proper force couple relationships. What we often see is one muscle that's sort of taking over that relationship. It's contracting too much. And then we have an opposite muscle that's not contracting enough. It's a little lazy. So we've got like the overeager muscle and we got the lazy muscle, and that's creating these alterations in our posture, which is messing up how we move. We can see here's some common force couple relationships throughout the body. So you've got your internal and your external obliques. Your internal obliques are going this way, your external obliques are going that way. So they create like a sort of a cross. And so this one pulls this way and this one pulls this way. And that creates nice stability in your trunk. That way, when you're rotating, right, you're not going to just, move one of your discs out of place. Your upper trapezius and the lower portions of your serratus anterior work to rotate your scapula. So your serratus interior, which I said is located right underneath here, right? It's in charge of two things. It's in charge of scapular protraction. So it rounds your shoulders around the front of your body, but it's also in charge of upward rotation. So it also keeps your scapula in line like this because it's attached to the bottom. So when it pulls from the bottom, your scapula, it pulls from the bottom like this. So it's tilted like that, and it pulls, kind of swinging it like that. Meanwhile, your upper trapezius, which is tied to the top of your scapula here, it pulls this way. So if we've got like a badly tilted scapula, that's where we see this real rounded shoulder situation, right? So what I need to do is I need to loosen up my upper traps because that's pulling it forward, that's pulling it down like this. I need to strengthen my serratus so it can pull from the bottom and get me back from here and tilt me back to there. That's going to get us where we want to be in terms of rounded shoulders. So your upper traps and your serratus anterior, they're supposed to work together, but the upper trap, took over, I'm just picturing every like movie from the 80s where it's like, he stole my company. So you get the one underactive muscle that can't do anything, and it's being inhibited by this, evil tyrant overactive muscle. You get your glutes working together with your quads and your calf muscles, right? All that's producing your extension movements, right? Your gluteus maximus creates hip extension. Your quadriceps are going to produce knee extension. Your calf muscles produce ankle plantar flexion, right? Well, when you're walking in your right, those are the muscles that are all working together, and they all have their antagonists and their stabilizers around the area, right? Your glutes have the hip flexors in the front. Your quads have the hamstrings in the back. Your calves have your tibia muscles, your shin muscles in the front. So, and then we can see that right here. So these muscles are all sort of working together, right? This is creating extension. This is creating ankle movements. And then we see like the deltoid and the rotator cuff. That's creating like your shoulder movements, right? The example that we kind of gave. So that's what we're looking at, like force couples. And again, we need to understand our anatomy. We need to understand what muscles are doing which roles in order to understand like proper force couple relationships. And that's what the second half of this course is going to be. Like today is our last day, sort of getting all the foundational information, and we're going to apply it for the second half of class. Like when we look at the foot and ankle complex on Thursday. Right? We're going to be looking at how the calf muscles perform plantar flexion and your tibia muscles perform dorsiflexion. So one goes this way, one goes this way, right? We want to have a good relationship there. Most people don't. Most people have way too much calf strength and not enough shin strength. So most people sort of dump all their strength in the back of their calf. So we often need to sort of stretch that out and strengthen the opposite side of the joint. All right. Any questions on that concept? Cool. All right. So next thing we're going to look at our actual joint motions. So we got to kind of understand if we are going to analyze this stuff moving forward, if we're going to be analyzing how bones are moving and stuff, we've got to look at like how your muscles have different amounts of leverage depending on what that joint movement is. So your bones, their job is to act as a lever, okay? So their job is to act as a lever by which you can sort of produce force. So if we look at like, we're going to see this in just a second in the PowerPoint anyways, but if we look at like this, right, this long bar right here is the lever. So this might be like a bone, and then it can pivot along this little axis right here. So if I produce a little bit of effort, let's say I've got a muscle that contracts this way, right? It's attached down here and it pulls down. Well, then whatever load I've got over here is going to raise up like a seesaw, right? So if I had a muscle right here and I had a muscle right here, I would want there to be sort of a rotary movement here. I'd want this one to sort of relax while I contract. I'm going to contract this one down here, right? I'm sorry, I attached the muscle up here. I don't know why I did that. Attach the muscle down here. This muscle is going to contract while this muscle down here is going to relax. And that's going to allow that movement to take place. So the bones are the levers, right? And then where it's pivoting, this little pivot point right here, that's your axis or your fulcrum, right? This is where you are going to actually pivot from. This is your joint. So, we're seeing like one bone right here. It would probably be two separate bones and they would pivot along this little joint right here. So the amount of leverage is depending on like how much resistance you're able to create. So what we're looking at here is in terms of like understanding joint motion, if we're understanding these levers, is a lever is going to rotate about its axis, or we call it a fulcrum. And that's going to be the result of force being applied to create movement. And there's going to be two types of force. There's either going to be, the amount of effort, that's the force that you're generating, right? A muscle contracting, versus the amount of force that is like a resistance, right? That's a resistive force. So your muscles are generating the effort to overcome the resistance, right? So if we got a dumbbell in hand, and it's 10 pounds, right? I've got a 10-pound dumbbell right here. My biceps muscle is going to generate at least 10 pounds of force, probably 11 pounds of force, and that's going to overcome the resistive amount of 10 pounds of force. Now, if I had like 70-pound dumbbells in my hand, I can try to produce 70 pounds of force in this bicep muscle, but I'll tell you guys right now, I can't do that. So if I try to generate 70 pounds of force, the resistive force is overcoming my contractile force, my effort. So my arm is just going to lengthen as it's going to be stuck down there. I can pick up a 70-pound dumbbell. I can chest press it, I think, once. I think it was my record. But I'm certainly not going to bicep curl that freaking thing. So that is looking at our joint motions here. I'm like second guessing myself now. I can't remember what my record on a dumbbell one is. So those are your bones, your joints, your muscles, and your resistances, right? So these are all kind of key vocabulary terms. We need to look how they interact with each other. So in your body, we've got 3 types of levers, okay? There are first class levers, second class levers, and third class levers, okay? And that's how all of our joints are going to move in one version of these levers, right? So your bones are the bars, that's the lever. Your joints are the axis or the fulcrum, that's the pivot point. And your muscles are applying force against a resistive force. So there are 2 types of force. There's the muscle generating force and the resistive force. Here's the first class lever, right? This is the seesaw. So if I generate effort, right, maybe I've got a muscle down here and I pull this way, pull down, right? Pull down like this one's going to go up like that, right? And then if I do the opposite, if I pull this way, it's going to go up like this, right? That's your seesaw action, right? It's pivoting along an axis right here. So this produces that seesawing action. You can see this during like your tricep when you look at like elbow extension, right? When you think about like contracting this way, right? You've got a muscle that's wrapping. It doesn't, look exactly like a seesaw because the seesaw is kind of even, right? The pivot point's dead center. In this case, it's not. It's kind of off kiltered a little bit, but this muscle wraps all the way around my elbow and inserts, over here. So when I pull, and it wraps around and pulls upward like this, that creates that seesawing action with this bone right here. So I'm using my first class lever. Then we've got second class levers. Oh, nope, we're still on first class levers. Yeah, nodding your head's actually an example too. If you think about like your head, like your vertebrae here, right? It can go down, it can go back up, right? That's actually better, honestly. That actually, you could picture the freaking seesaw. But skull crushers, right? That's a seesawing action, right? Doing that tricep extension, or nodding your head, going back this way, right? That's a first class lever. It's the seesaw. So you'll see seesawing movements throughout the whole body, not super commonly. But then we got second class levers. So second class levers, they look a little bit more like this, right? You've got the pivot point at the very end. And then what's happening is load is sort of applied to the center, and then effort's going to overcome it, right? So you would have like a muscle attached here on top, which would shorten this way, and that's going to raise this lever up against a resistive force that might be, in the middle, sort of pulling it down, and it's going to pivot along the axis at the very end. So you can think of this as a wheelbarrow, right? Like if I'm lifting a wheelbarrow straight up off the ground, it's pivoting along the axis. I got a resistive force in the center there. And then I'm going to produce effort going this way. So she's going to, I was like, how is she doing this? Yeah, she's standing up. She's got her knees bent, right? So then she creates hip extension. That drives her upwards, creating the wheelbarrow action, right? Using a socket wrench. Good Lord, my brain. Using like a socket wrench where you're tightening something down. That's an example of a second class lever. Sort of rotating. So one of the really common, like the really common way that we look at this, your calf muscle is a perfect example, right? Your calves are just like a wheelbarrow, if I'm like this and I'm literally just going up onto my toes, that is exactly the wheelbarrow action, right? My axis is the very tip of my toes. So that is what we're going to see during plantar flexion. It's a second class lever. And then we got third class levers, and third class levers are sort of the opposite, right? The pivot's at the very end, but this time effort's coming upwards and load is going downwards. So this one is kind of interesting because it's like the effort's applied to the middle, and that's overcoming this load, right? You can think of this as like if you were shoveling something, right? You guys have probably tried to shovel something. I don't know if well, probably not because you're smart people. But if you've ever tried to like shovel something, like let's say I had like a shovel in my hand, and I held both of it like this at the very end of the shovel, and I put it in, and I tried to like lift it like this. That's going to be really hard, right? But if I take my hand down here
And now I've got like a little bit of like an assist in the middle. If I push down like this while I pull up like this, that's going to create the pivot a lot easier. So then I'm going to more effectively shovel something, right? Now, this third class lever, this is what you're mostly going to see inside the body. This is the most common type of lever that we've got, because it requires, plenty of force in order to be able to happen. So you think about like right here, your biceps, right? This is kind of funny, but your biceps actually run down. They only grab right here at the very, very end. So you've got effort pulling the elbow up this way against this big, long lever here. This is why your bicep muscles are really strong, guys. They really are. But their mechanical advantage is not very large. They're not able, this is a third class lever. So it takes a lot of force, a lot of effort to move even a very small amount of resistance. This is one of the reasons why, like, you are never going to be able to bicep curl as much as you can often do other exercises. It's not really designed to move that much. And it's not just because these muscles are smaller. I mean, they are smaller than some other muscles that you've got, but they're a third class lever, so they're not going to be producing that much force. So those are our levers, right? And the other thing about a bicep curl is it's also going to have a lot of torque, which we're going to look at next. So those are your general arthrokinematics. You're probably not going to be tested on lever types. Oh, man, which is lucky, guys, because it's a pain in the rear. It involves a lot of like drawing, and you gotta, if you hate drawing, it's not great. But you're probably not going to be tested on your different types of levers. But they are very helpful to know, because one of the things that we're going to talk a lot about, again, going back to just constantly talking about why posture is so important, which, we're harping on posture all the time. Posture. Is because, like, you want to take advantage of these levers. Your muscles are supposed to move like this, right? So anytime we see someone moving in a way that's sort of counterproductive to how they're supposed to move, we need to address it. And understanding that there are sort of three different types of like movements that are happening is going to help you look at like these overall like joint motions. So we're going to be looking at this concept called mechanical advantage. Mechanical advantage is basically like how easy it is for a muscle to produce that force. Your quads are very similar to your biceps, but the difference is, if you look at your quadriceps, they've got this really cool little bone called your patella, get your freaking kneecap, which is actually running around the center. And that little pivot there, which raises things up just a little bit, and now gives you something to pivot around, increases the mechanical advantage intensely. So that makes it much easier for you to generate force. And this is why your quads can, this is why we can launch a soccer ball across like an entire freaking field, because your quads can create a lot of tension. Now there is like rotary motion. There is like rotary motion that can happen. This is moving a bone about its axis, right? So basically we think of this as like a pivoting action, like a rotating action, right? So, going like this, that's rotary movement, right? And then the other one we got to look at is torque. Torque is a force that produces that rotation. So here's the thing about torque. The closer a weight is to the axis, the less torque it is generating. And the farther away, then the more torque it's generating. Torque is going to make something feel much heavier to the muscle, because the muscle is going to lose its advantage. So here's a big long example. I'm going to read this kind of word for word here. I know everybody hates that, but when holding a dumbbell straight out the arm, straight out to the side at arm's length during like, shoulder abduction, the weight may be approximately, say, 24 inches from the center of the shoulder joint. So I don't know how long someone's arm is, but we're going to assume that it's 2 feet long. So if I had a dumbbell in my hand, that dumbbell is about 2 feet away from my shoulder here, right? So it's 24 inches. So The prime mover for the shoulder abduction is the deltoid. So that's my deltoid muscle, right, wrapping around the side here. And its attachment is about 2 inches from the joint center. So it actually attaches kind of down the arm, getting closer to the dumbbell, but only about 2 inches closer. So there's a difference of about 22 inches. Okay. 24 inches all the way, right? Minus 2, 22 inches. So that's 11 times. That's an 11 times difference between the length of this muscle and how far away it has to be able to produce force. So that's going to feel, relatively heavy if I'm trying to do raises like this. But if the weight was moved closer to the joint center, so let's say I duct tape that dumbbell. I don't know why you do this, but I duct tape that dumbbell to my elbow, right? Just wrap a bunch of duct tape around. And now I've got the dumbbell here and I'm doing my lateral raises, right? And it's resting on my elbows on both sides, right? Well, that exercise is going to feel much easier now because the dumbbell is so much closer to my shoulder joint. So if the weight is moved to the joint, like let's say to the elbow, right? The resistance is now only about 12 inches away. Deltoid muscle is still 2 inches long, so that's a 10 inches difference, right? So that's only 5 times greater. 10 divided by 2 instead of 22 divided by, 22 divided by 2, right? So the difference is so this is going to feel much lighter than when my dumbbells were all the way at my hands. Now, obviously, we're not duct taping things to our clients, right? But if I held onto my dumbbells and I had my client do just a little, half hammer curl, and then I had them raise up like this, that is going to be a little bit lighter feeling. So let's say I got a client and I work at a gym and I've got access to 5-pound weights, 10-pound weights, 15s, 20s, 25s, 30s, right? And I got a client and I've been training them for 4 weeks. They've been doing 10-pound lateral raises. And I'm like, all right, we want to do between 10 and 12 reps here. If you can't do 10, then the weight's too heavy. But if you can do 12 consistently every single time, maybe the weight's too light. I'd rather get you right around the 10 to 11 area, right? So I'm trying to make sure that my client is working, close to failure. So got their big heavy dumbbells and they're like, you know what? I'm getting through all 3 or 4 sets here pretty easily. That wasn't that bad. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, that feels really good. The weight's really light. And it's like, okay, well, maybe it's time to move you from 10-pound dumbbells up to 15-pound dumbbells. So I give them 15 pounds and they try to raise it and they're like, oh, and they get up and they can only do 6 of them, right? And it's like, ugh. And it's like, well, 10's too light, but 15 is too heavy. What I can do is I can change the lever. I can try bending their elbow slightly and having them do a raise like this with that heavier weight. And that will increase mechanical advantage, although it'll reduce by reducing the amount of torque. So by reducing the amount of torque, it's going to be a much easier amount of weight for them to lift. And then I do that for a couple of weeks and then they get good at it. And now I can give them those heavier dumbbells. They continue developing their strength and we sort of work our way, onto the next threshold, So in the example above, the resistance was reduced by about half. So we can use this as a regression for our clients. This is one of the reasons why doing a push-up on the ground versus doing a push-up on an elevated surface is so much easier. Because if you think about where the pivot is happening, let's look at a push-up here. So you can see you're pivoting from all the way over here. That is a long ways away. So when you go down like this, there's a lot of torque. But if you put your knees on the ground, the reason it's easier is not even because think about how much weight you're reducing. If you're actually taking yourself down to your knees, you're chopping off just from how much do your calves weigh? How much do your feet weigh? You weigh, let's say 150 pounds and you go down to your knees, you're only reducing the weight by, I don't know, 20 pounds at the most,
I mean, that's being generous, right? Probably 15 pounds. Not very much difference there, right? But what you are doing, and the reason they are slightly easier, is because now the axis, the pivot point, which is the knees, right? This is the wheelbarrow situation, by the way, second class lever. We are moving it closer. So we are moving the resistance closer, therefore it's going to feel much easier. That's also why, again, going up onto a wall is going to make that easier, right? Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the last thing we're going to look at is talking about how our brain is going to actually learn these particular movements. So let's look at what we call motor behavior. So motor behavior is how your nervous system sort of interacts with your muscular system to produce, like, learn movements and sort of produce these movements properly, right? You'll hear people refer to this as like muscle memory sometimes, and that's not a bad term. It's not like your muscles actually have memory, but like, I get it. You know, it's a good term to kind of describe things. So it's your motor response to internal and external stimulus, right? How the kinetic chain is sort of learning movements. And so there's sort of three aspects of this. Your motor behavior is made up of your motor control, your motor learning, and your motor development. How well you're controlling things, your ability to develop new skills, and sort of learn things in real time, and then your ability to develop like new skills over like a lifetime. So motor control is how your central nervous system is integrating information to produce movements, okay? How it is taking in sensory information and, you know, executing the appropriate response. That's your motor control, right? Wow, that weight's really heavy. I need to generate this much force, right? There's motor control. But then we've also got motor learning, which is the integration of like motor control over like time, like through practice and experience. So the more often you do something, the better you're going to get at it, because you are developing your motor learning, right? And then motor development is the change in that skill or the change in that behavior over your lifespan. So we want to continue, you know, getting better at like moving the way we're supposed to. We want to get better at that over the course of our entire life, right? We are trying to develop those motor skills consistently throughout your lifespan. I want to continue studying how I'm supposed to squat properly for the rest of my life, you know? And so like new pieces of motor, motor control is going to change over time. You're going to learn how to do those new movements, and it's going to produce an overall change in your development. So learning how to like use your muscles in conjunction with one another is a big part of this motor like learning, right? This motor development. So your muscle synergies are groups that are recruiting to work together, learning how to, do things simultaneously. Biggest muscle synergies that you've got are during like squatting motions, or shoulder pressing motions are really good examples, right? Like during a squatting motion, you're using your glutes, quads, and hamstrings. Your quads and hamstrings are antagonists to each other, right? And yet in this case, they're actually working together. So there's a lot of movement happening here at the ankle, knee, and hip joint simultaneously. So all of those muscles need to work synergistically together in order to produce like a effective proper squat. And the same thing is true during like an overhead raise, right? Or a shoulder press. Both of those things, right? I need to reduce force in the front, produce force in the back, and produce lots of force on the sides, right? And that's going to sort of overcome that resistance and raise me all the way up. So there is our, and then actually, if you were to even put all that together, right? Like if you were to do like a squat to shoulder press, now you're getting basically like what we call a compound movement, where you're using multiple muscle synergies all at the same time. So this all kind of comes back to this idea of proprioception, which I know I spent a lot of time talking about when we talked about the nervous system, but proprioception is huge. Remember, it's your body's understanding of where it is in space, right? This is like, all of the sensory input coming in and your body interpreting that sensory information to determine like what your joint position is in, or how long a muscle is, or how lengthened the muscle is, or how shortened it is, right? It uses the information from those receptors throughout the body, your mechanoreceptors, right? Muscle spindles, Golgi tendon organs, joint receptors, and that provides your brain with information about like static or transitional or dynamic positions of the different muscles and joints throughout the body. So this is how, again, your body understands where it is. This is why it is so important to do core training and balance training, because both of those are going to enhance your proprioception. Your core is it's your dead center. Like everything's located all along your freaking trunk here. So teaching your brain like what position this is effectively in is going to make it much easier for your body to know how to produce force. And then standing on one leg, right? I'm giving my brain all kinds of information. It knows how much muscle I'm using when I'm in this position. It knows how much muscle I'm using when I'm in that position, or this position, or this position, right? It's using all of this different information. It's going, okay, well, we know exactly how much force it took to get back to neutral if we were like this, and we know like that and like this, right? It's all different pieces of information. And so we want to make sure that we are incorporating as much proprioception into our routines with our clients as possible, at least if we're working on stabilization, right? There's actually a guy I follow on Instagram. What's that guy's name? I love this guy's approach to exercise. He's a physical therapist. Let me see if I can find him real quick and I'll pull up. I can't remember his freaking name. Come on. I'm like scrolling through a bunch of junk here. Let's try. Man, I really want to show this to you guys. There's so many cool exercises that this guy does. I wish I just subscribed to him, so I don't know his freaking name. Aha! Okay. Love this guy's posts. This guy is all about proprioceptive training. So he does a ton of really, really, really cool exercises, right? Like right here. The surface area is reduced, right? He's on this like very little amount of surface area because he's on this bench, and he's adducting his thighs simultaneously while he's doing nice, slow contractions, right? That's a great way to work on stability. He's developing maximum proprioception, right? Here he's moving nice and slow, right? And the weight is in the front here, which is, actually reducing mechanical advantage that makes this more challenging. Right, there's your kind of classic, when you do like your plank, you're reducing your amount of surface area. You have to create like a lot of force on both sides. Let's see here. Here's a really cool one. Look at that. Think about like how much information's coming in. He's doing a push-up on this resistance band with his foot on a stability ball, and then they're weighing him by putting a chain on his back. The chain's not special. You could do anything to make that resistance, but that's friggin' tough, right? That's Derrick Henry, by the way. Here's a really good one. He's on a foam roller, side to side. He's only doing one side, which is challenging because that's causing a lot of balance, right? So very freaking advanced, stabilization chest exercise there. So I just love, like, this guy's so creative with how he does all this stuff, right? That's a really good one as well. I actually do like the idea of like the chain thing, because then it can just kind of sit on your hips pretty easily. But that's great, right? That's a very unstable movement. We'll do one more. Look at how freaking unstable that is, right? That's incredible. He's developing maximal proprioception by doing this. Freaking love that. I do those body weight.
That's tough.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that wild?
That's crazy. That's tough. Yeah.
Dude, and that's a great movement, by the way. I like it. They call that like an airplane, and it's just this movement right here, and it is just a great way to like teach your low back how to like function with your abs. Because if your abs pull too much, you're gonna hinge, and then that's gonna be inefficient, right? You're gonna hurt your back. And if your back pulls too much, well, then you're gonna have too much arch. So it's a great way to kind of learn how to get like a nice flat low back. Meanwhile, you're strengthening your glutes and your hamstrings and, you know, your calf and your foot's doing all kinds of work. Love it. Freaking love it. So a lot of people think stabilization is meant to be like, you know, it is our foundation, right? A lot of people think like stabilization routines are easy because it's like, oh, you're doing low intensity, low weight, so it's easy, right? And it's like, no, like, I think it's honestly one of the hardest phases. So how do we use our proprioception? How do we actually, you know, integrate that to do movement? Well, that's another term that we're going to see here, which is called sensory motor integration. And that's your nervous system gathering all that information, interpreting it, and go, well, last time this worked, so do this. You know, it's selecting and executing, you know, appropriate motor responses. So you know, there has to be a way to activate your muscles efficiently and effectively, and so your nervous system's going to know that. And so for, you know, reduction, right? For the reduction or stabilization of forces, your body's going to go, okay, well, we're trying to lengthen a muscle out. That's 20 pounds. I need to generate 19 pounds of force, right? Less than that. For force production, like concentric contractions, your brain's going to go, okay, well, this weighs that much. I need to produce this much force to overcome it. So really good versions of things like that, where we're sort of increasing production. This is great because it allows your body to sort of learn how it's supposed to move and learn how to execute those movements. Now, one of the things that's really important here to remember when it comes to sensory motor integration, it's only going to be as effective as the information that you are giving it. This is why training with good form is so important. So your skeletal system needs to be properly aligned in order for you to like develop the, you know, use the appropriate length tension relationships, force velocity curves, right? All that information coming in, all that has to be the right type of information. So we need to have good alignment. This is why we stretch before our workouts. It has nothing to do with the warm up. You can warm your muscles up just by stepping outside into hot weather and your body temperature rising. Not a great way to do it, but it works. You can warm your body up by hopping on a treadmill, producing a little bit of ATP for a little while, and then boom, like your core temperature rises. That temperature rise keeps your muscles pretty freaking safe. But the real reason we like do mobility and we warm up, it's not about getting you warm. I mean, it does that, and that is important, but like, the real reason we do it is because it increases your mobility, and then you can move the way you're supposed to move, which is why I hate it when I see people just, you know, doing a general stretching routine when they go into the gym. They just pick like random stretches, right? They do like a little crappy warm up. The problem with that is you just wasted your time. Like, that's why I don't like it. I mean, obviously I don't like it because like it's not effective, but I also don't like it because I'm like, what a waste of time. You know, you did all this mobility training, but you didn't do it to improve the mobility and the things that you need to improve mobility on, or you didn't improve the mobility on the things you're going to be working today. You just kind of did something in general, and that's a total waste, right? So
we want to make sure that we're developing this the way that we're supposed to, right? We're integrating proper movement, and that is why we stretch before we work out. You loosen up your overactive muscles. Overactive muscles don't let go. You can't move the way you're supposed to. So your body's going to move in some variation, and it'll find a way to get the job done, but it's not how you're supposed to move. And now, like, you're not actually training. You are training, but you're training to do something improperly. That can eventually lead to overuse injuries or, whatever. So this is one of the reasons why we always harp on, this is not in your PowerPoint, actually. I just put this here because this is something we talk about in our program design classes. But we talk about the SAID principle, the principle of specificity. And that principle is basically, what I've been harping on all day. Your body is going to adapt specifically to whatever type of stress you put on it. So you want to get better at chest stuff, then you need to do chest stuff. You want to better get at leg stuff, you need to do leg stuff. If you want to get better at moving your body the way it's supposed to move, you need to train it to move the way it's supposed to move, not just to get through the workout as it was, sort of just like cookie cutter program set for you online. We need to adapt the body, with intention and make sure that our clients move the way they're supposed to. All right. So at the very end here, actually doing all this is the art, and that's where we come back to that idea of motor learning. We're trying to help our clients with their motor learning. We're trying to teach them how to do stuff. So what is motor learning? Again, it's the integration of motor control through practice and experience, right? Doing stuff, repeated exposure. So we are looking at like how we can sort of learn movements and then retain those movements in the future. We're going to do this as trainers through feedback. Feedback is a couple different types, right? Feedback is basically sensory information, helping your body like develop that motor learning. Like, oh, that didn't feel good, right? Like that's a little bit of feedback. Or man, that was freaking tough. That was so much harder than when I did it this way, right? That's a little bit of feedback. So that's internal feedback, right? It's where the sensory information is helping your brain kind of know what the position is in. Like yesterday, I remember I don't know why I remember this, it sticks out in my head, but I had like one really bad rep while I was doing my chest presses, and I was like, ow, I was like, what was that? And then I was like, oh man, and I changed my angle slightly, tightened my core again, and then the rest of the reps were fine. I didn't have any major problems with it, but I definitely had like one weird rep, and that was that's a little bit of internal feedback. And so then I was like, oh yeah, sure enough, I loosened my core. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't zoned in. So it's your body's monitoring your movement and learning about body position. That's your internal feedback. And then there's external feedback. And you are a form of external feedback as a trainer, right? External feedback is information provided from some external source. If your client's using like a heart rate monitor and it tells them what their heart rate is, that's external feedback, right? Versus like when they're doing internal feedback and they're like, I feel a little nauseous because I've been sprinting too much. Like that's your internal feedback. You're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of lactic acid running through my body. But external feedback is like a heart rate monitor saying, hey, you can push a little harder. You got more in the tank, right? But there's also, the trainer, right? Saying like, hey, really good, really good squats there. I love how you're tracking your knees over your toes, right? That's an external feedback. So we're going to use external feedback as trainers. We're going to do this to let our clients know whether they're moving the way they're supposed to or whether they're not, right? It's augmented feedback. It's supplemental. It really is not meant to replace internal feedback. You want your clients to rely on learning how to feel what a good repetition looks like, rather than you saying like, hey, really good job. You're going to be correcting them forever if you end up doing that, right? Don't let your clients overly rely on external feedback. This is actually one of the reasons why, I will often coach really hard in the beginning, and then I kind of step back towards the end of the second sets or third sets. I reduce it and then I go, how'd that feel? And I like to ask my clients, and then they have to think back on that and feel the difference. So the versions of that external feedback, that you're going to focus on is the difference between like knowledge of results versus knowledge of performance. Knowledge of results is used after the completion of the movement to let your client know about the outcome. So for instance, like, tell your client that they were good, right? They did a really good job, right? That looked really good. That's an example of like their results. The results were good. But knowledge of performance is really where, we tell them specifically what was good, right? So this provides information about the quality of the movement. So saying something like, hey, during the squat, your feet were externally rotated and your knees were excessively adducting. So now that'd be like your quality was like, hey, like that was not so good. Your knees were caving in, right? But then we said like the reason they were caving in, you were internally rotating. I need you to externally rotate, get those knees back to neutral. Have them do that, and then all of a sudden it's like, now, do you feel how that's different? And they're like, yeah, I feel that. It's like, that's what I want you to do in the next set. Give them their rest and let them go into it. So make sure your clients are not becoming dependent on external feedback, kind of like I said, especially from you, because that could result in them not using internal sensory input, and then they aren't going to learn the movements as quickly. And that's about it today. So each system of the human movement system is interdependent. They all kind of work together, right? Muscular system, skeletal system, nervous system, they all work together. You got the muscular system generating tension, the skeletal system providing you like the anchors and levers and pivots, and then the nervous system is sort of controlling all of this movement. So they got to work together. And that all kind of comes together to form our motor behavior, right? How we are intended to move. And that is it for today, guys. A lot of separate definitions today. A lot of different concepts. Honestly, like this is all like the story behind why our industry exists, is sort of what this lesson kind of feels like. More so than on how to do stuff. It's just like, here's a lot of the components. These are all the things you need to continue considering when you're working with your clients. Like keep an eye on this and that. And always remember, it's like, oh yeah, the reason this is important because of length tension relationships. The reason this is important is force velocity curves, right? We always want to be very specific. And that's it. Any questions today, guys? Questions, comments, or concerns? All righty. So tomorrow we are going to be meeting up. We're going to do sort of our in-person meeting because we've got our midterm tomorrow. So we are doing sort of the meetup as well as sort of the testing, right? So I want to get together with everybody and talk about some of our most common postural distortions. We're going to look at lower cross syndrome, upper cross syndrome, and we are going to look at pronation distortion syndrome. So those are sort of the three most common joint dysfunctional movements that we're going to see. To be determined, I got to get final confirmation today. I will let you know where we are meeting. We are either meeting in the park tomorrow, because it's outdoors and public, or we are meeting like at Sochi. I want to make sure that like nobody else booked the Sochi space. So I will give you an update on that when I send the email out later today. So keep an eye out for the email today. Everybody look at that today. And then what else was I gonna say? Oh, and then it's either 8:30. I'm sorry, it's either 9 a.m. Or it's going to be 6 p.m. Both of those are options. So just like normal. But Bay, that's the first time you've heard that.
Yeah. Is this optional or Brett?
This one, yeah. So I think we'll leave this one optional because we've made them optional for COVID's sake. We are getting to a place though where they are going to start becoming like mandatory. It's going to just be part of class's schedule. But you're going to go back to sort of a more traditional schedule and stuff, which will be really nice. And it'll sort of feel a little bit more like school. So it'll eventually be mandatory, but we're going to still make this one optional tomorrow.
Alrighty, cool. I think if I'm not going to be there in the morning, I'll make it afternoon.
Okay. Yeah, love it. Love it. The evening ones are usually a little small, so I'd love to have some people up there.
We're still going to be doing Zoom calls?
Oh yeah. It'll still be like sort of a hybrid situation. But some of these in-person ones are going to start becoming, part of class.
Right.
All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.
Later.
Later.
Bye.
Good job today, guys.